So in day-to-day life, when we think about these negative actions, for example, the physical negative actions such as killing or harming other people. So as His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama always says, these teachings and this practice are actually something relevant in today's world. In any society, any culture, it doesn't have to be religious. So, for example, if you kill someone or if you harm someone, you are doing something against the law of the land. So it's a very basic practice for an individual on a personal level. And so, therefore, once you refrain yourself from indulging in these negative actions, be it physical, speech, or mental, and then the result is that you end up engaging more in the positive actions. So positive actions here is actually more about restraints, avoiding negative actions. And the third, Lord Buddha tells us about how we can do that in our day-to-day life, how we can be more engaged more in positive or virtuous actions and restrain ourselves from negative actions. In the third line, he says, you have to calm your mind or subdue your mind. So if you do that, then you can achieve the first two things. So ultimately, it comes to our mind. And it is a fact that we all know that on a personal level, for all of us, the two most important things that we have is our body, the physical body, and our mind. And we know that the mind is more important. And the mind always plays a greater role, be it suffering in our life, or be it the happiness in our life. So whatever things happen in our life, so the mind plays a greater role, the impact that it brings to our day-to-day life, the way we think. So therefore, Lord Buddha says that it is so very important first to calm down your mind, and to subdue it. So once you are able to do that, then your physical actions are only physical actions, and your speech, verbal things of saying gossips or hatred speech or whatever negative things or positive speeches. So they are all a kind of expressions, the result expressions, what goes in your mind. So therefore, the third verse when he says, subdue your mind is very important. So then when we look at the mind, I think it's very simple in some way that we can all relate to our own experience. Mind, we can categorize into three broad ways. The first category is, of course, the positive mind that we have, loving. When you love someone, when you feel compassionate towards other people. So these positive qualities that we have, we can categorize this as the positive mind on one side. Then as a human, we are also born with negative minds in the sense afflicted minds such as anger, hatred, jealousy, arrogance, ego, and so on. So these are also a part of our mind, a part of our life. So then that is the second category. And on category third level, there is another category which is neutral minds. Neutral mind in the sense they are neither positive nor negative. So their impact doesn't really affect much to what we do in our life. So we have to be very mindful of these three categories of the mind and what happens, what are the minds that you have, and when something happens, what type of the mind is actually playing now, and also how to control that, how to calm down, how to find the right antidote to those things, and how to increase the activities of the positive mind and so on. So therefore, it is very important in our day-to-day life to be mindful of our actions. And so when Lord Buddha says the third line, subdue your mind, and I think another important point that we have to note is For example, if you look at the 10 positive actions, so the 10 positive actions, the physical, the 3 physical and the 4 verbal as positive actions are actually, as I say, a result or mere expressions of what actually goes into your mind. So the mental thought are actually the causes that gives rise to makes you express in a certain way to when things occur in your day-to-day life. So that actually tells us that the mental thoughts are more important. They are actually the origin and the cause of your actions. And we can relate or look at it and from another point, looking at the mental thoughts as the motivations that they motivated your physical actions. So therefore, as we say that whatever, as we discussed in the last 2 sessions, the motivation is very important. So before you do any actions in a day, a part of your daily practice, so whether if you are a morning person, and of course, when you meditate in the morning, so the first thing that we have to do is settle down and shape our motivation, set up our motivations. And as much as possible to generate a positive motivation, because the action that comes after your motivations, whether if you're able to generate a positive motivations and in the early morning, so most of the actions that you do over the day will become positive automatically. So that is natural for all of us. And so therefore, whenever we engage in any kind of such Dhamma talks and discussions, so first we pay very much importance to shape our motivations in a very nice for the benefit of your own and also for the benefit of the numberless sentient beings here. For example, in today's world, of course, the year 2020 is a fact that we all know. We have seen one of the most devastating pandemic all over the world, and millions of people are affected, and people who died, people who are suffering still, and millions of people are displaced and lost their jobs. So everybody is in some kind of difficulty at this moment. So physical difficulties, and though people may not have physical difficulties, but anxieties and also uncertainty in your life. So a lot of mental sufferings and problems are happening all over the world. And we see in America in the last few days, a lot of civil unrest and protests. So it's very sad. So therefore, think about all these sufferings and all the difficulties that we are having in this world. And with a pure motivation to be of as much as possible to practice compassion towards all the suffering. So we have to shape our motivation in this way. And one thing that I wanted to remind all of you is that His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama always tells us a very important teaching. He always speaks about 2 factors. The first one, he says, as a human being in this world, we all have a lot of, converging similarities, converging factors or similarities, primary similarities as a human, because we all belong to a 6 billion human family. And His Holiness always says that whenever he meets someone, so he considers himself and that other person also a part of human family. So when he look at the other person in this way, he feel connected, he feel close to that person. So these are the primary similarities that we all share. And from the Buddhist point of view, of course, we all are equal in the sense of wanting happiness and do not want suffering. So this is very important primary quality that we all share as a human to combine, to come together, to live as one family, to live as one. But as we live in different countries, as we are grow up in different cultures, so therefore we have a lot of secondary differences too. differences when it comes to color, differences with race, differences with cultures, religion, economic, and there's so many of them. So, but the thing that we have to do now is to focus more on our primary similarities, the commonalities that we all share, and we think more on the common things that we share, our shared qualities, then we will find we will be able to develop genuine respect and a sense of equal with each and everyone. And this is very much necessary in this world at this time. And because many of the problems that we face now, so maybe the pandemic may be something natural, maybe in a way it is something unavoidable at this moment, but a lot of other problems are all created by our own small thoughts. As a small thought that we have, the way that we think, when you look at some people, when you look at other people, the first thought that runs into your mind actually decides what you want to your reactions. So therefore, it's very important. So what actually I wanted to say here is that this is really a very challenging time for all of us to practice on compassion and also think about all the human beings as one big family. So in this way, so for just 1 minute, we will all meditate and share our motivations for a few seconds. So I think for 15 seconds, please meditate with me to feel compassion towards all the people in this world, and that we all are equal in so many ways, and that whatever the main problems that we have, may they be what should I say, pacified. And so in this way, I wish all of you to generate the motivation here for a few seconds. So thank you. Sorry for this little bit disturbance. And so I think once we shift our motivation in this way, so let's go back to the main topic that we're going to discuss today. And in the last two sessions, we discussed on the first two principal parts, which is generation of renunciation and the awakening mind. And why these three practices are called the three principal parts, I think we discussed before, that in order to become enlightened and achieve our goal, so these three qualities and the practices need to be combined together. But when we say combined together, there is an order of generation of these three qualities with us. So on the first level, we have to work hard to generate the true renunciations and to renounce the samsaric pleasures and develop a true renunciation. It is very important to practice, think about the precious human lives, and also meditate about the law of the cause and effect, the karma, and so on, which we have already discussed before. And then later, meditate on the 7-point cause and effect and exchange of self and others through, and then generating the awakening mind, which we have already done in the last two sessions. So today, the emptiness, the topic on emptiness, why the emptiness is so important. And also, as we discussed in the last two sessions, why it's also so difficult to understand. So Lama Tsongkhapa has stated in his three principles of the path, the text, that if you do not have the wisdom realizing emptiness, though you may be very well trained and develop the renunciations and the bodhicitta, and still you will not be able to cut the roots of the sufferings. So therefore, uh, strive to attain the wisdom realizing dependent originations or emptiness. So now when we look at this verse, it tells us that the wisdom realizing emptiness itself is actual antidotes. It is the actual antidote that cuts through the delusions and the afflicted emotions that are present within us. So therefore, the path practices like bodhicitta, the renunciations, and they are all skillful means. But with those skillful means on one hand, and the wisdom realizing emptiness on the other hand, then we will be able to progress further. So having said that, it is then the question comes back again. So then why the emptiness is so important to know, and how come that the wisdom realizing emptiness is so powerful that it has the capacity to cut through all the afflicted emotions. So here I wanted to, when Lord Buddha, I personally feel that Lord Buddha himself has a very difficult time to teach his students when it comes to emptiness. So therefore, if you study the Buddhist philosophical texts, so there are different sources of the text where Lord Buddha has taught the emptiness in different tone. In some texts, he said something else about emptiness, and in other texts, he said something else about emptiness. So, which all texts in some or the other way looks a little bit contradictory to each other. So it actually tells us that the topic itself is very difficult. So the first thing that Lord Buddha, after having enlightened, so if we look at the histories, when he became enlightened, there is a beautiful story that his father, the king, says that he is very ashamed of his son becoming ascetic and becoming a monk and living the very luxurious palace life. And so his father is, of course, not happy with him becoming a monk. And so, but Lord Buddha, when he became enlightened, the Buddha, and the first time when he meet his father, so his father sent out a lot of caravan to receive him. And then when they meet for the first time, his father asked him, so you have abandoned your palace and you have abandoned your all the responsibilities and become a monk, staying in the forest, meditating for all these years, and you have ashamed all of us. So now what have you gained from all these things? And Lord Buddha's only answer is that I have found the truth in life. And he said that there are two truths in life. And so this is Lord Buddha's reply, and it's very beautiful. So that is the first time that Lord Buddha taught on the two truths. And the truth in the sense, the conventional truth and the ultimate truth. So what does it mean? Why the teaching on two truths becomes so important when it comes to understanding emptiness? So Lord Buddha says that in our day-to-day life, when we look at things, there is, in all our life, we can understand from our own experiences that there is an appearance. Things and everything appear to us in a certain way, and there is another reality which resides back there. So the reality of an object and the appearance of that object is different in our day-to-day life that we can understand from our own experiences. For example, all the emotions that we have, all the problems that we face in our life, sometimes they are based more on the appearance nature of the things. So we took for granted that what things show their face, or when things appear to us in a certain way, we took it for granted that that must be the reality. But when they show their true reality afterwards, then we feel rejected, we feel difficult. So therefore, Lord Buddha says that the appearance nature of the everything is not their ultimate reality. So the ultimate reality is beyond the appearance nature of that object. So the true truth here, Lord Buddha actually means that when to understand what is behind the appearance of an object is to understand the ultimate truth, which is the understanding emptiness. So this is his first teaching on emptiness. So Lord Buddha's. So now going back to understand this, going back to from the ground level, if we try to look at what he really meant by the appearance nature of a phenomena and the ultimate reality of that phenomena. So going back to the ground level, so understanding about these teachings, Lord Buddha actually taught this point in a few different ways. And the first thing is, I think we discussed in our last two classes, where we discussed about the emptiness pertaining to self and emptiness pertaining to phenomena. And the four philosophical tenets in the Buddhism, four philosophical tenets, the two lower ones and the two higher ones, came after trying to explain the reality nature of all these things. So the first thing, I think here the important thing is when we try to find a reality. So as a person, as I said before, the thing that is most connected to us, the thing that is most close to us is the self that we have, that we consider so important, the I or the person or the self. So everything that we do in a life, our purpose in our life, so any activities that we do, it's actually revolve around that sense of I, that feeling of I. So in every practice in Buddhism, every meditations, so be it renunciations, bodhicitta, or emptiness, it has to relate to identifying the real self that is present within us. So when we do not understand what is the actual emptiness, the fault actually lies in our not being ability to understand the real self that is within us. So therefore, Lord Buddha first laid down the understanding of the self and identifying the self from different philosophical schools. So the first thing is, as we discussed before, it's the simple one, that the self, to think of self as something completely different from our physical body or the physical aggregates. So these are the thoughts that most of the non-Buddhist schools have at that time, that self is something different from our physical aggregates. It's its own identity. So whatever the physical body changes, but the self remains. And I think we discussed about the three principal qualities of the self. The first thing is independent, permanent, and singular. So permanent in the sense, if we take the examples of our life of an 80 years, or for example, 100 years of life, we discussed that in the previous class, that we can see the changes that happens to our physical body over the years. When we are young, then we become teen, then we become adults, then we become aged. So we can see the changes that happens to our physical body over the years. That is a very gross level of impermanence that we can relate to our own physical body. But the self, which resides within that physical body, we tend to have a feeling that it's the same. You feel that the body that you have when you are 5, 6 years old, you feel that, oh, that's my body. And the same thing, oh, I did that, I went to school. So you can relate to the self as it is the same self that resides all through your life. So just take the example in our one life. Then if you look at your previous life, so since as a Buddhist, since we have to believe in our previous and the next and subsequent lives, though you go from one life to another, you actually change your body, but the self continues its journey. So therefore, in the text, it said that there are some meditators, some yogis who can foresee, who can see 3 lives in the past and 3 lives the next 3 lives. And just it's a kind of a story you can take. So when they look at their past life, they can see that all the past 3 lives, they've been born as a pig. So, and when they look at next 3 lives, they're again born as a pig in the last 3 years, last 3 lives, and the next 3 lives. And now they feel that if you live your life like a pig, and then you will be reborn as a human. So what it actually tells us is that because their problem is that they are not able to look beyond that. So therefore, what it actually tells us is that though you change your body from animal to human and to devas and other things, but the self resides all through this life. So they feel that self is permanent and it's singular in the sense it doesn't relate to one physical body. It stays forever. And so Lord Buddha, when he first gave the teaching on emptiness, he said that self is not permanent and it's not singular. When he says self is impermanent in the sense that though as our physical body changes over the years and over the time, and the self which resides within it has to change. Because the change that comes in a whole life has to come in the shorter durations. So that is the first analogy and the reasons that the Lord Buddha bring forward in understanding self. So there we refute the notion that the self which is within us is completely different from our body. So that is rejected. So now self and the body are related. There are a lot of connections between these two, which we can understood from our own day-to-day life experiences. For example, we usually say, I am tall, or I am happy, I am feeling cold, I am hungry. So when you are hungry, it's actually your stomach that is hungry. Or so when you say I'm thirsty, so you can see all these connections between these two, the self and the body. So all the Buddhist philosophical tenets, from the lowest tenets, refutes the notion of self as completely different from the aggregates. So then Buddhism established the self as something dependent upon its aggregates, the body. So there is a relation. Now, to understand that relation, there are many levels of relations that we are talking about here. So depending upon understanding the different levels of relations between physical and the self, so understanding of emptiness progresses further. So the first level of understanding of emptiness coming from Buddhist schools is to understand the reality of self. That self is not as we think about it. It is something completely related to our physical body. So the absence of a self as an independent or singular is the first level of understanding of emptiness. So this is accepted by all Buddhist philosophical tenets. Now, when it comes to the next level of understanding of the emptiness, which is the school called the mind-only school. So mind-only school explains this emptiness in a much more complex and a beautiful way, so which I'm going to devote much of our time on this topic today. And the middle way philosophy, middle way school's understanding of self, we will discuss in the next class. So the mind-only school, the name of the school itself is called mind-only. So the reason why it is said it is that it actually tells that there are no. It actually, I think this is the best way to understand it. It says that when we, in our day-to-day life, we distinguish between something external and something internal. So things that go in your mind, for example, the mental thoughts, mental processes, and the afflicted emotions, and these things are all internal experiences, internal things. Then external, mountains, river, house, or all your small things, all your belongings, possessions, they are referred to as external. So in a conventional understanding, there is always a difference between what is external and what is internal. So the mind-only school go one step further and says that there is not an absolute external thing. So this is what they say. Now let's try to understand it in a more logical way. First, let me tell you their explanation about the absence of the external phenomena is actually very similar to what quantum science and the quantum physicists says nowadays. So let's look at that, what science says, and then we can relate it to a much more easier way. The quantum physicist says that, I heard directly from the physicists when they explain the quantum physics. They says that, for example, I have a coin here, so you can see. And so when I place this coin in my two palms, so if I asked you, where is the coin, for example, I don't show my hand to you. And now when I asked you where the coin lies, so either, maybe now you cannot point. So if you point here, and when I open, it's not there. So then you will ultimately say it's in the right hand, right? So that is very natural. So, and you're right, it's here. You're right here. But what quantum physicists says is that when you know that, as soon as you know that this palm is empty, this hand is empty, you come to the conclusion that it has to be here. So, but that is not according to physics, the law of physics. The law of physics actually tells us that as long as you do not see it, or you do not observe it with your eyes or any other ways, so that coin doesn't exist even in this palm. So that is what the law of physics says. And it's very beautiful, interesting. But we can say that no, it has to be either in one of the hands. And since it's not present in one hand, then it has to be present in the other hand. But that is what that conclusion that we draw from that is using our logic capacities. We are actually using our logic that it has to be either the two, and since it is not this one, it has to be that one. So here we are using the logic to understand the reality. But that is not proven through the quantum physicist, right? So this type of logic in our Buddhist philosophical system is called excluding all alternatives. So excluding all alternatives, the sense, if a thing has to be A, B, or C, and since it is not the A or B, it has to be C. So the conclusion draws that the thing has to fall under the category C because it is neither A nor B, and there is only three alternatives possible. So this is the logical way to look at things, but it's not the reality. So the reality is what the quantum physicist says. When there is an observer that observes an object, then the observed object comes into being. So as long as there is not an observer, the object doesn't exist. So this is what the science says. Okay. And now if we take one more metaphor that we use in the Buddhist philosophical system, I don't know whether you're very familiar with that expression or not. So in the Buddhist philosophical system, we use this example that a cup of liquid, when you put on a table, and when three different beings look at that, one is the human, and others are the heavenly beings, the devas, and then the hungry ghost. So when the humans look at that liquid, it appears as water. So for example, I have a glass of water here. And so we are all humans, and I hope there are no devas here. So if there are any devas among us, maybe you might have a different vision. So we all look at this glass of water as pure water. And when a deva or the heavenly beings look at that, it appears nectar, a pure nectar to them. And a hungry ghost, when it looks at that, it appears as blood or pus. So this is what is written in the text. And they are all correct in their visions. It's not a wrong perceptions. It's not mistaken perceptions. It is correct perceptions. And so therefore, though it is one common object, one common glass of water, but it appears as a different object to three beings. So, and they are all right in their own ways. But we don't have three different things existing at the same time on one glass of water. So what the mind-only school concludes this theory, it says that there is actually not a common, solid, absolute phenomenon existing there. Everything appears to us in the way we observed that objects. So they say that, for example, we all, three or four of us, when we look at an object, for example, it is a flower. So some people look at that object flower and get a different understanding, a feeling. The other people maybe get a different understanding of the feeling. So without using the logic or analogy and further critical analysis, if we ask, is there a common object for all of us? We all agree and say that the flower is the common object that we all shared and we all see. But in reality, the flower that you saw, the flower that he saw, the flower that you saw, the flower that I saw is different. What I have seen is not seen by you, and what you have seen is not seen by any of others. So this is the conclusion that is made by mind-only schools. So now this is kind of a basic framework about what they speak about emptiness in a different level. Now, let's get back to the main topic. If this is what the mind-only school says, so they conclude it by saying that now, for example, take the what this understanding of emptiness really help us in our day-to-day life with our meditations on our daily practice is that there is not an absolute hostile person there. There is not an absolute attractive person lying there. So when two people look at a person at the same time, that same person may look very attractive to one person, but may look very hostile to another person. So therefore, just looking at one object or one person's at the same time, one people may get very angry or agitated looking at that person. That's the same person. But another person may feel very loved and attached to that same person. So what the mind-only schools tells us is that if that person's appearance of hostility, hostile to the first person exists from his own objective side, then he has to appear hostile in nature to any other persons that looks at him. But that's not a fact. The very after moment when somebody else look at that person, he may look completely different. So what mind-only school says is that the hostile nature appearance of the object is created by your own mind that looks at that object. And also when that person appears very beautiful and attached and attractive, so that part is actually, exaggerated part is actually created by the attachment, the attached mind that looks at that objects. So this is the explanation of mind-only schools. And I think it's really very beautiful explanations, and there are many, many ways that it can relate in our day-to-day practice. But the way they explains the mind-only schools, explains the emptiness, is a little bit different from the other schools, and sometimes a little bit complicated also. But generally, it's very beautiful in that way. So whenever, as we always say that when we face a problem in our life, most of the time it is due to the negative mind within us that makes us suffer, as we discussed before. And in the last class also, we discussed that when you get angry, it is proven even by the scientists now that the object that appears at the time of when you get angry towards some people, so a larger part of that object is mental exaggerations. It's not the reality. So anger doesn't have the capacity to see the reality. It only sees, what should I say, an exaggerated nature, exaggerated quality, or the exaggerated perceptions, which is not the reality. So now we come back to understand the two truths. So the difference between appearance and the reality, there is a big difference. So these delusions like anger, hatred, and attachments, they are based more on exaggerated nature, which is the appearance of that object, but they don't understand the reality. So emptiness is all about knowing that these appearances are fake, not reality, but the reality lies much more deeper behind that. They're all understanding emptiness in one way. And when we are agitated, for example, sometimes it's very difficult to differentiate when does this agitated minds or the hostile mind arises within us. Sometimes we mistake them for the normal conditions of our mind. So it's very important to be mindful when does an afflicted emotion arises within us, and that for us to recognize that it is an afflicted emotions. So therefore, it's always very important to first understand the reality of the things. So when we are able to find what is the reality, then we will be able to know that the mind or the observer that looks at that object, whether they are based on understanding of the reality or whether they have exaggerated perceptions based on those things. So this is very important. So this is how the mind-only schools tells us about its own presentation of emptiness. So we have here two different levels of emptiness as being understood by two different schools. So the first one, if we have to conclude here, the first one is understanding of the self as absence of independent and permanent and singular. It's neither independent nor singular, and it's also impermanent, that it changes it changes in the same way that our physical aggregate changes. And so understanding of that is understanding of no self, or the selflessness presentation in Buddhist schools. And we can say that when Lord Buddha teaches about emptiness, the first teaching he gave was the teaching on no self, so on the Four Noble Truths. So when Lord Buddha teach about no self, and as I said before, he had a very hard time to first teach the no self. And if you look at the history, we know that Lord Buddha became enlightened on that's tomorrow. So it's really a very important day tomorrow. So tomorrow is the 14th of the fourth month according to Tibetan lunar calendars and Sagadawa. So Lord Buddha enlightened tomorrow, but the day he first turned the Dharma wheel is exactly 49 days after that. So the first turning of the wheel of the Dharma is actually on the 4th of the 6th month. If you look at these two, there is a little difference. The way the Mahayana schools and Theravada schools look at those dates. I think apart from this class, I think this is also important for all of us to know. I think the Theravadas, they believe that the turning of the wheel of Dharma is also on the 15th of the 6th month, according to our lunar calendar. So, but the other traditions celebrate it's on the 4th of the 6th month. But that's not the main important. What I'm trying to say here is that why it took Lord Buddha 49 days after he became enlightened to turn the wheel, to teach the Dhamma for the first time. Why did he take a 49 days break? Was he too tired, or maybe after meditating for 6 years under the Bodhi tree, and so Lord Buddha may need some rest, but that's not the case. And so as soon as he became enlightened, Lord Buddha says that I have found the profound teachings, which is really, really deep, really difficult, and free of any fabrications, which is actually the teaching on emptiness and the no self. But then he realized that at that time, there were no suitable students or disciples to whom he can teach. So therefore, he says that if I go and teach now about these very profound teachings, no one is ready to accept. They may develop wrong views and they may criticize me. And so therefore, I prefer not to teach it for the time being. And the history actually goes like this, that later the Brahmas and all the deities and the gods and goddesses came and requested Lord Buddha to turn the wheel of the Dhamma. So that's where he turned the Dhamma wheel for the first time. So the reason why I'm telling you this story is that the teaching of the emptiness, teaching on emptiness, Lord Buddha himself also faced a lot of difficulties for him to find the exact students to teach. And therefore, the great the masters such as Nagarjuna and Arya Asanga. So these two masters are the most important masters if we look at the understanding of Buddhist philosophicals in a much deeper way. So these two masters has played the greatest role in the survival and the disseminating of Buddhist teaching in the world till now, because they are the first one who, what should I say, who out of their wisdoms, using their wisdom, they even correct some words of Lord Buddha. They criticize and also they distinguish between what is interpretable and what is definite teachings. So as we all know that Lord Buddha has given complete freedom to his disciples to judge his words, not out of devotions, not out of faith, but as a goldsmith will test the purity of gold in a different experiments. Similarly, you have to check my own words. So Nagarjuna was one of the greatest masters who came after, who analyzed the Lord Buddha's words. And he divided the Lord Buddha's teachings in two different categories. One is called the interpretables and one is definitives. So the reason why we have to understand this is that in some point of life, Lord Buddha also said that there is a self which is completely different from physical body. Self is a completely different entity from physical body. But then on the other way, Lord Buddha teaches about the no self. And then in one of the texts, Lord Buddha teaches about what the mind-only school says, the absence of external phenomena. And in some other texts, he teaches about, teaches and criticizes his own earlier sayings that which is not true, but this is the reality. So if you look at these different teachings from one way, we get confused. Now, if there is only one teaching about which is the greatest emptiness, then why don't you just straight away teach and let us know what is the real emptiness so that we can follow it, we can meditate on it, and then we can attain liberations. But that is not the thing. As human, the nature of the human mind is different for each people. The mindset, the mental dispositions that we have, and also the capacity of our understanding or wisdom is also different in different people. So therefore, if you just give one teaching, one instructions, there is not like a universal instructions that will work for each and every being in the same way. It is impossible. As we all know that there is not a universal medicine. If you take a medicine for headache, and that may not cure your stomach ache. So there is not a universal medicine. So depending upon the illness, there has to be the doctor has to give a medication depending upon the illness, the problem that you have. So similarly, Lord Buddha teaches all these different levels of teachings of emptiness, depending upon people's understanding and their own mental needs. So therefore, for all of us also, to understand emptiness is so important, because if we gain some understanding on emptiness, what it really is, it will help us to calm down the agitated mind. It will help us settle down the dust which are fully in our mind, for them to settle down first, so then we can see the reality of the thing. So the more we are towards understanding of the reality, then we can have more power to know what is reality. In this way, there are less chances for us to be go under the power of our, should I say, negative emotions. Because all the negative emotions that we have that make us suffer all the time, they're all based on the fake nature of the things, fake reality, which is the conventional realities. And as a human, we are not able to distinguish what is the ultimate reality and what is the conventional reality. We end up thinking that the conventional reality is the ultimate reality. That's why we mistake that. And so we keep on suffering. So for example, if I give you an example, a beautiful quotation from A Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way by Shantideva, where he says that all the suffering that we have in our in our world are due to self-cherishing thoughts, self-centered thoughts. And all the happiness and the containment happiness that we have is due to the thought that cherish others. And then Shantideva further says that, what more do I have to say? We can just take the example of Buddha himself, or in today's time, take the example of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, that he is someone who always cares about other people, and he's always happy. And we are the one who always think about our own self most of the time, but the result is that we are always more agitated and more suffering. So it's something like you have a burning iron, a hot iron in your hand, which is the self-centered, egoistic thinking, and we know that this is the one that burns you, but still we are holding it very tightly. We are holding it very tightly, and we are not letting go of it. But still, at the same time, we are shouting that I have pain, but you are not letting go of it. So Shantideva says that you have to let go of this. Since this is the one that causes you suffer. So the reason why I quote this, the line is that when we study more in depth in understanding emptiness from the basic levels, we gain more wisdom to understand reality in our day-to-day life. So when in our day-to-day life, when we settle down in meditation, and the meditation we discussed before, whether it's in the morning or evening or daytime, or on your holidays when you have more time, the best meditation is to check one's own mind, agitated mind, what we call the monkey mind. So thoughts that goes, the processes and the thoughts that go in our mind. What happens before you become sad, for example? What are the things that make you sad? And it's easy to find an external excuse. It's very easy for all of us to blame on somebody else, to blame our cause of problems to somebody else, to the government, to the community, to the society. We all do that. We have been all doing that for all our life, but we all know that that's not the solution. So we all know that if that helps one become more happy, then it's fine. We can continue to do it. But reality is that it doesn't help. We are not able to find any solution by that. So just blaming other, criticizing other, always doing that doesn't really make you more happy. So a lot of things, just a change, bringing a change in the way you think, bringing a change in the way you do, that will actually change a lot of other things. A lot of changes may happen that will make one more happy and more peaceful. So that's what I wanted to say. And so I think we're already 1 hour into this discussion for today. And so we will have a short break here for 10 minutes. And I think then for tea break, and then when we reconvene, we will have Q&A sessions. And I hope to have some questions from you, all of you. It doesn't have to be particularly related to today's discussion. It can be any general Q&A. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we'll meet at 7:15 in 10 minutes.
10 minutes, okay.
We had some heated discussions here in the tea, while having tea.
Oh, that's great.
Let's see how it goes. Questions and answers. So, welcome back, everyone. So now it's a questions and answers session. And if you have a question, just please, we are not so many participants, so you could just unmute yourself and ask a question. Is there anyone who would like to be the first?
I can go first.
Martin.
Hi, good to meet you again. One thing I find very interesting is the relationship between dependent arisings and emptiness. And I think you have maybe already touched upon this by discussing how we perceive objects and so forth. But maybe if you could comment on this, would be very interesting.
Okay, thank you. Dependent arising and emptiness, I think we haven't really touched on that in the last discussions, but in a way, maybe we did touch, but not really entirely. Dependent arising is also one way to understand emptiness, because so when you look at the things, there are two way to understand them. One is by one is from the negative side in the sense emptiness. Usually we usually gain understanding about emptiness by negating something, by refuting something. For example, when you refute the absolute or the independent nature of the things or phenomena, then you understand emptiness. So that is by refuting something, you understand something. So that is one way. And dependent arising is from the objective side. So dependent arising and emptiness are in one way very connected. The fact is that when we are told for the first time that there is no self, no absolute self, it really startled all of us. It comes as a shock to many people. Therefore, for the meditators, usually for the meditators and the yogis, when they first meditate on no self, when they get to a point where they feel that when they critically analyze their body, that my head is not me, and my body is not myself, my mind is also not myself. So when you deconstruct your aggregates one by one in this way, ultimately you cannot find any solid presence of the self within you. So sometimes for all this life, for whole life, and for everything that you do, whatever we believe, whatever we do, a lot of our thinking and our way of life is actually based on the belief that there is a solid self, an absolute presence of a self as we all feel it. But when you get to that level of understanding, there is nothing of such sort, that it really comes as a shock to us, for any people at the first level. So therefore, to combine the understanding of the emptiness with dependent arising is very important. So dependent arising is, what it actually says is that though there is not an absolute self as we described, as we think, but there is an existence, but it exists in some way. So its existence is a very special existence, not which is free of intrinsic or the absolute existence, but in a way that it exists and it does its work, it does its function as a self. For example, when you plant a tree, when you plant a seed of a tree 10 years ago, and then when the tree grows, now you point at that tree and say, I plant that tree, right? And but the fact is that the tree actually grows by itself, and you have never planted the tree that you are pointing at now. You're pointing at a huge tree with a lot of fruits and leaves and so on, but you only planted a seed, a small seed. And that person who planted that seed is 10 years younger than you in one way. So you are actually 10 years older than that person now, but still we get to say that I planted that tree. So what it says is that the presence of the self at that time, the presence of the self now, and when you plant a seed, you can even claim that you plant a tree. But there is a relationship between the self and what you do in our day-to-day life. So when you plant something, actually it may be your hand. If you critically analyze it in this way, I wanted to tell a story here. So since we have some time, in Tibetan, when I first started to learn Tibetan grammars, so Tibetan grammars, we have a lot of active verbs, like I write a letter. So you will say that I write a letter, and so then we will say whether it's the real, in reality, the one who writes the letter is your hand. So we have to say my hand writes a letter. So then it goes further. It's not really your hand. Your hand is whole thing from your arm to your fingers and your nails and everything. It's actually your finger. Your finger, my eye with my hand, with my finger writes the letter. Your whole finger is not writing, maybe 2 fingers. And so in this way, if you involve all the other, what should I say, the agents that are involved in making a process, there are a lot of them, actually. There are a lot of them. But you can still call that you did it, because there is a relationship between you and your hand, because your hand is a possession of you. So there is a relationship or connection between the possession and the possessor. So self as a possessor, as an owner, and the hand as an object. So therefore, these connections tell us that we can see that. So understanding this connection is understanding dependent. So the self is actually dependent on its physical. So it's not an independent thing. If the self is supposed to be completely independent, it cannot be understood. It cannot claim that when its hand does something, it does. So there is no way that it can claim it. So this is one way that we can relate to understand self from its dependent origination. That's one way. But the more detailed understanding about dependent origination, I think we will go more detail in the next class. Okay, thank you. Any other questions?
Rinpoche, I have a question. I may not have understood correctly what you said about the mind-only school's position, but if, according to the mind-only school, there are no external objects at all, then how do they explain the fact that we see something and react to it? I can understand the idea that the object has different qualities on the conventional level, but I don't understand the mind-only position that external objects don't exist at all. And I think you brought quantum physics into the picture to, explain that a little bit. So can you please explain how they say there are no external objects, but yet we have reactions to them, or we interpret them in certain ways?
Thank you. This is really tricky, and sometimes it's really funny when we say there is no external object. So I think, what do we mean by an external here? To understand that meaning also makes some difference here. Generally, in our conventional world, we have, of course, inner things and external things. So mind-only school actually doesn't refute that. For example, the objects that you have in your house, for example, a table, a pot, a pan, of course, is not something which is within you, which is not an inner world. So definitely it's an external world. So mind-only school doesn't refute the existence of that external level. So when the mind-only school says that there is no external object, it's a way one step further. What it tries to say is that if an object exists from its external side, external side, then it has to exist without any relation to the observer or the mind. Mind-only school established actually the relationship between the observer, the mind, and its observed object. What is the relationship between these two? Whether the object comes first or the minds come later. This is a beautiful debate. Sometimes some schools, this debate becomes something similar to the chicken and egg, which comes first and which comes later. Some schools say that the object comes first, then the mind or the observer sees it after the object came into being first, then the mind perceives it at the second moment. Okay, that may sound a little bit more practical to all of us when we think of anything in our own experiences, your own experiences. If that is the case, mind-only school says the object exists at the first moment and the observer comes at the second moment, then what happens at the first moment? Is there no observer at the first moment? So what happens to that object? Has nobody else seen that object? So what mind-only school says is that as soon as an object exists, there is an observer that observes that object. If there is not an observer that observes the object doesn't exist. So that's why the quantum physicists say that when you close your palm, and though there may be a coin here, logically saying, but as long as you didn't see it, it doesn't exist. So that is one way the mind-only school says it. But the real technical thing that mind-only school tells us is that there are two ways to look at the things in our world. One is without using our critical investigations. Okay, for example, you can say that, as I said before, I'm writing a letter. Okay, conventionally, we all agree, I'm writing a letter. Then when somebody say, I'm writing a letter, and if you opposed, or if you question what should I say? If you questions that standpoint by saying that, is that really who you're writing the letter? Is it not your hand writing that letter? Is it not your finger writing that letter? Is it not pen that writing the letter? So in this way, if you use the critical investigations, then your actual standpoint of saying that I write a letter, it actually disintegrates. It's very difficult to understand, to prove it, how you write your letter. So mind-only school says there are two ways to look at a phenomena, two ways to look at an event. One without using critical investigations, and one when we apply critical investigations. So now we all look at one object together, a pot, for example, a flower pot, which is in front of all of us together here. So without using the critical investigations, we can all say that we're all looking at a common object, which is the flower pot that is in front of us. So what I see the object is actually seen by you. What we saw that object is seen by someone, all other presence here. Okay, that is the conventional way of seeing. But mind-only school says that the conventional way of relating to an object or its existence is not the ultimate truth, it's only the conventional truth. So ultimate truth is when you really apply the critical investigations, whether have you seen what I saw? Has the Mr. A seen what the Mr. B saw? So if you use the analogy in this way, investigation, what I have seen is not seen by you. What you saw is not seen by the third person. So we all have, though there is a common pot there, but in our mind, I saw a different version of a pot in our mind. And another person see a different version of pot in their mind. So the version of the pot that I saw in my mind is actually created by my own mental thinking, my own thought processes. So that's why when I look at that pot, I may feel very happy. Oh, it's such a beautiful pot. But when some other people look at that pot, it may have a different version. So this is what mind-only school says, that when critically investigated in this way, there is not a common pot. So everything that you see is due to your own karma. What you see today is due to your own karma. So I bring here a beautiful, for example, this one, the story of Asanga. So if some of you might have heard, Asanga stayed in meditation for 12 years in the cave to have a vision of Maitreya, so Maitreya Buddha. And so after meditating for 12 years, he couldn't even see the Maitreya Buddha. And then this story of is generating compassion towards this dog with a lot of he's the half of the dog with the pulses and the wound, and then he generated compassion, and then that very moment he had a vision of Maitreya in front of him. So then Asanga was so happy that he has finally the vision of Maitreya. So he was so excited. He carried the Maitreya in his shoulder and he ran around the town and the village, asking every people, come see, have a vision of the Buddha Maitreya. But nobody saw anything. And there was one old lady somewhere who saw that Asanga was carrying actually a limping dog on his shoulder. So this story just tells us that the vision, what you saw, is due to your own ripening of karma, due to your own thinking. So it's not what you see, is not what you saw is not seen by others. So in a conventional way, we speak about that. So this is a little bit similar to this metaphor that we use. So this is what mind-only school's explanation about the absence of external things. I hope that makes some sense.
It does. Can I just ask, so would it be correct to say that from the mind-only school position or view, the object and the observer sort of arise simultaneously?
Yes.
Okay,
simultaneously. Yes.
Thank you so much. And we had Annie who was raising her hand. Would you like to ask a question?
Yes, I think what you just said really helped a lot. I think, Rinpoche, my question might be more regarding terminology, because when I heard external side, I thought of it as being or an external object. I thought in terms of when you were saying independent origination, you're looking at things from the objective side. So then I got confused about what is objective and what is external. It does the since now I understand that in the mind-only school you do recognize external objects. Is that right? But you don't. But then if you proceed on the path of trying to attain enlightenment through the mind-only school, if you attain enlightenment, then how is the mind? What is it going to be viewing? Is it what happens? I think it's the external and internal that I'm a little bit confused with. Like, how does the mind change in that way then?
I think the terminology is a bit confusing all the time, and I'm always worried about that when we speak about the technical things, especially coming with the philosophical tenets. We really confuse the people with usage of a lot of technical terms and different translations. But the reason why I wanted to say here, the reason why I want these two sessions to be a little bit more technical session is because I think that we are discussing about emptiness, and I thought that emptiness cannot be understood merely by just a few beautiful words or expressions. So I thought that if we indulge or go in a little bit deeper in understanding what different philosophical tenets and say about emptiness, and I think it will help us to gain a more deeper understanding. So that's my thought. So, and Annie, you're right that this technical terms really confused, but in Sanskrit and in Tibetan also the term is same, and we have to explain it to get rid of the confusion that we have. The term itself doesn't really explains anything. And for example, if I give you an example, we all recite Heart Sutra. And in Heart Sutra, it says no eye, no ear, no nose, no taste. So when some people hear it for the first time, it really confused them. What are you really saying? No ear and no eyes, it's completely wrong. You may feel it. So that's why most of the sutras and the texts, they have, what should I say, the literal terms and the literal meaning, and the more, what should I say, the hidden meaning, or the meaning which we can understand when it is explained. So, for example, no eyes means no intrinsic, no inherent eyes, so and so on, right? So similarly, in Tibetan word for the external is chi dun. So chi is external or outside. Nang means internal. For example, Buddhists are called Nangpa, which is the insiders, and externals chipa, So dun means object. So the roughly translation is external object. So, but when we try to understand it from the technical point of view, then we go a little bit deeper than what the word just give us the meaning. So the technical meaning is hidden behind that. So therefore, as I said before, conventionally, of course, mind-only school doesn't refute the existence of an external object like a pot or a cup. But what it really refutes is that when critically investigated, there is not a common external object. A common external object here, what it means is that an object which is viewed by every observer in the same way. So it actually refutes that. What it says is that due to your own karmic realizations, karmic ripening, and the way a lot of the mental thought processes that go beyond it, and with all those other chemical reactions that are going on in our mind. And so then when you look at an object, you get a vision of that object, understanding of that object. So that is different from all the individuals. So that's what the mind-only school says. And ultimately it says the object to which you get anger, the hostile object, or the attractive object. So mind-only school says there is no such thing as an hostile object or an attractive object. The nature of that object is what it is, its face value. And so if an object itself, it is a common, if a common object is hostile, then every person that views that object has to appear hostile to that person. So that's what mind-only school says, and that understanding is what they call the realization of emptiness in the school. And they said that when you're able to meditate in this way, it will really help you to control your emotions and finally get rid of all the emotions from its root, and you become enlightened. But and to your the later part of questions, once you become enlightened, it's same. I mean, there is no difference that when you look at an enlightened being's mind, when you look at an external object or an object, there is not much difference. But the thing is, as of now, for an individual like us, when we look at an object, we can automatically we feel that object has its own reality from its objective side, and that it is not created, it is not in relation to our mind. So that feeling is common to all of us. But once you get enlightened, that sort of feeling doesn't arise. So I think that may be the only difference.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Annie. We have Emilia. Emilia wants to ask a question. Please unmute yourself.
Thank you, Rinpoche. When we talk about the mind that goes from one life to another, is this mind impermanent?
Yeah, of course. It is impermanent. Impermanent in the sense that we have to know what do we meant by permanent or impermanent. And the first thing is the mind is actually not a solid character or not a solid object. Mind is actually a composition of so many different thoughts combined together. And when it travels from one life to another, you can see that it is impermanent in one very easy way that I feel is that, for example, the mind that we have now actually came from our past life. And also past lives. But still, we don't remember anything. Most of us don't remember anything. And therefore, if it is permanent, then if it is permanent, it shouldn't be relying on external conditions for its functions, for its survival, for its any kind of activities. It shouldn't be depending on external conditions. So then it should be able to remember everything as it does for over the years. I wanted to make this more clear. For example, one of the analogy and the reasons that we use to establish the past life and the previous life, next life, is through recollections, through our memory. For example, in our life, for every people, what we did yesterday, we can recall very clearly today. Because the duration, the time gap between what your activity and today is not that long. So therefore, we are able to remember each and everything clearly. But if you were supposed to remember what you did on a particular day 5 years ago, or maybe even 1 month ago, maybe we don't remember that clearly, unless that event or that activity is something very memorable, like your birthday celebrations or something. If it is something special, then we remember. What it really does is when something special things happens, whenever we do anything in our life, it leaves an imprint or impact on our mind. And then that impact later comes into being as a memory, and you remember it over and over again. But when something very special, or tragic things happens, then you remember, there is a greater chances that you remember it much more clearly, because it leaves a much stronger impact on your mind. Yes. Okay, so that's why if the duration is closer between the time there is a greater chance for you to remember. That is why the reincarnation things, the reincarnated lamas, when they were young, they're able to remember things. When they are maybe 1 year old, 6 months, they remember things, because the duration between the past life, when they passed away, and when they're reborn is not that long. And one thing that really make us forget everything is the circumstances or environment that we are in. Because when you are young, your mind is very pure, and as you grow up in an environment where there is a lot of negative emotions, a lot of other things. So when these other thoughts take a lot of space and control your mind, you tend to forget the nature mind. So that's why we keep on forgetting as we get older. So one reason, again, coming back to the main point, to prove or to understand that mind is impermanent, is that it also changes as our body over the years as we progress. Because it doesn't have an independent existence, it changes the way our physical body changes over the years. And so therefore, sometimes it forgets things, sometimes it remembers things. So I think that may be one way to look at the mind as an impermanent.
Okay,
thank you. Yeah.
Then it complies with the first seal. All composite things are impermanent. So when you look at the first seal, all composite things are impermanent.
Yes.
The mind being permanent, so it's composite.
Yes.
Composite.
All things are
composite.
Yeah, it's of course a composite, but the first seal says that all compounded factors are impermanent.
Yeah.
Yes, so therefore, mind is also a part of what should I say, compounded phenomenon. So therefore, it's impermanent, compounded in the sense that mind, as we discussed before, you have to only visualize or understand mind from its functions, its activities. It is not like a solid object that you can look at its shape or color. There is no such things for the mind. But the nature of the mind, what we call, is luminous. Luminous in the sense it has capacity to cognize something. It has capacity to perceive something. So looking at its functions, then in relation to that, we understand the mind. So the formation of the mind or understanding of the mind also has a lot of conditions and external causes that are in place to form one single mind. For example, we usually talk about 4 important causes for a mind to come. The first important thing is a mind needs an object to perceive something. If it doesn't perceive something, it is not the mind. Like light, for example, a torch or a light. The function of a torch or a light is to dispel darkness, right? So whether it's a bright torch light or even a candle light, so the functions, the activity, responsibility, or the role of that is to dispel the darkness. So if it doesn't dispel some amount of darkness, it is not a light. It cannot be counted as a light. Similarly, mind, the nature or the functions of a mind is to observe something, to perceive something, to know something. So if it doesn't know something, then it cannot be a mind. So therefore, mind again depend on its object to get its own existence. So in this way, and also if we further look at the mind from how fragile our mind is, and we know that we are momentarily changing when we think about the impermanence nature of our life. For example, human life, we change over the years. So then, as I said before, the change that happened in a year happened in a month in a day, and day in hours, second, and so if you break down in this way. So every moment we're changing. So similarly, the first moment, the second moment, the third moment, the first moment of the mind and the second moment of the mind. The first moment of the mind, when it compares to the second moment, it is the present mind. But when the second happens, this is already past. So in this way, it again relates a lot of things on its, what should I say, its formation. So therefore, it is considered as a compounded factor, relying on a lot of causes for it to happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Rinpoche. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Amelia. We have 10 minutes left. So is there anybody else who would like to ask a question? We don't seem to have questions.
If not, yeah. Okay. Then shall we wind up?
No.
I may ask a question. Check.
Okay.
How can we integrate this understanding of emptiness into our daily life, just in a very simple way? How can we think about emptiness, for example, when we wake up in the morning, without too sophisticated philosophy, but something that would be helpful during the day?
So when you wake up in the morning, it depends on what you do first. If you do some prayers or practice, depending upon individuals, we usually say that the best way to start a day is to meditate on emptiness. And meditate on emptiness, if you, for example, say the verse going for refuge to the Buddha and Dhamma and Sangha, I go for refuge. And then by my giving and so on, may I attain enlightenment. So when you just say this verse, there are two places where the person or the I comes. I go for refuge. So then at that very moment, say it for the first time, I go for refuge. Then just think on that I and try to find what kind of I you're talking about and where that I really resides within you, and whether it's your body or whether it's your mind. And this way, so if you spend a few minutes trying to find about who this I is, whom you really consider the most important person in the world, whatever we do, we actually fight with people, we quarrel with people, and we do a lot of things just to comfort, just to please the I which is within us. So therefore, in this way, when you realize that, when you meditate on emptiness in relation to the finding the identity of I at the first moment, so then you will gain a kind of a feeling that there is not much solid I as you always think that it exists. So then when you realize that, the next moment you will really feel a kind of relief and a kind of feeling where at ease, that a lot of things that I do or you do every day in life doesn't really make sense. If the nature of I is like this, if it is empty, then why should I worrying about so much of unworthy things that I do in my day-to-day life? So that will ultimately make you more cheerful, make you less selfish. And if you're less selfish and self-centered person, as soon as the self-centered goes down, the ratio goes down, so that the thought that cherish other people increases, and you started making more friends. And the way when you meet someone, the way your face expression also changes, the way you talk also changes. So then you make more company, you get more friends. And so in this way, you're never lonely, you're never alone. So I think it's very simple to start every day morning with a practice, with a short meditation on emptiness in this way. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So that's the last question.
Celeste has posted one, didn't you, Celeste, on the chat?
In chat.
Yes.
It's Celeste.
Difficult.
It's a bit unclear. It's possible Maitreya manifest any occasion, or is it set to come?
Okay, so I think the first questions, I think we already deal with it. It's about the mind-only school's way of, I think we answered that. The second thing is Maitreya manifest an occasion is said to come. Okay. Okay. Mind-only, Maitreya. So Maitreya not... So this is very Buddhist thing, really very Buddhist thing. And so I have to tell you in relation to a little bit of history. According to the Mahayana's understanding of Buddhist teaching, we say that there are supposed to be 1,021 Buddhas to descend on this world. And Lord Buddha is the fourth. And next is the Maitreya. So in some way, this question is really, what should I say, very good questions, because we often talk about Maitreya as the fifth Buddha, which is yet to descend on this world. And how come that Asanga has seen the Maitreya and so on, this sounds a little bit of contradictory. The reality is that Maitreya not to come to this world in the form of a Buddha as Shakyamuni Buddha is yet to come. Lord Shakyamuni, through the 12 noble deeds, first to come to this world in a human form, to, what should I say, as a son of a king or a Brahmin, and then all this, the 12 noble deeds that we study, and in the form of a Buddha, enlightened being. So that role of Arya Maitreya is yet to come, which is to become much, much later. But Maitreya as a Buddha, Maitreya as an individual is enlightened many, many millions of years ago. He is an enlightened being. So therefore, an enlightened being is always engaged in some kind of activities to benefit the sentient beings here and there. So therefore, that Maitreya that what Arya Sangha saw is a different form. And when Lord Buddha descended in this world, when Lord Buddha came to this world, he came with 8 companions. So the 8 companions are the Avalokiteshvara, and one of them is Maitreya, then the Vajrapani, and so on. So 8 of them came as companions of the Buddha. But these narrations are completely from Mahayana's perspective. So Mahayana's perspective and Mahayana's understanding, or the, the narration. So this Maitreya came with the Lord Buddha in the form of a bodhisattva and teaches. And he also composed the 5 treatises on the perfection of wisdom, which Arya Sangha went to the heaven and bring it back to the world. So this is the story behind that, I think. But in the general history which is commonly accepted all over the world, which is according to the Theravada traditions, is a more simple one. So it doesn't speak about the Lord Buddha as being enlightened millions of years ago. So it just says that he became enlightened in this very lifetime. When he became enlightened in the Bodh Gaya, that was the first time he became enlightened. So this is a different story, and in that story, there is not much role for the Maitreya to come. So I think that's all for this. Do we have some more for the chat? Is that all?
No, unfortunately, I missed the chat questions, but we don't have more.
Oh, okay, sure.
You already asked.
Sure. Okay, thank you so much. Then I think the time is for us to conclude. And so the discussion that we have for the last 3 classes have been really wonderful. And I wanted to thank you all for your concentrations and your time. And it has been a great time for me to share some of the thoughts that I have with all of you. And also, I didn't realize that this all happened during the very, precious month of Sagadawa, where the Lord Buddha's converging of the 3 great deeds of enlightenment and so on. So it's really a wonderful timing also. And I wanted to thank Norbu Center for giving me this opportunity. And through all these activities, we all have gained a lot of merits. And today we all pray together with these merits. May there be everlasting peace in this world, and may all the sufferings never come again, and the current problems that we have with this pandemic be also eliminated soon, and also the crisis in the United States and the civil unrest be also resolved as soon as possible. And ultimately, may all sentient beings have the causes to become enlightened. So with that, I wanted to thank you each and all, and have a good time. Thank you.
Thank you, Rinpoche. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rinpoche, for generously sharing all your knowledge about Dharma. It's so precious for us. And thank you, everyone, for joining today. please remember that the link that you received is going to be the same for the next session that is going to be next Thursday, same time. So you're all welcome back. Please come back. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rinpoche.
Thank you.